All right. Okay, well, welcome all to the November 11th Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund Grant Committee meeting. We're going to start, as we always do, with a virtual participation check-in. I think since the one member of our public who's here with us today has attended, I think, all of our meetings, this is not going to be new information for anyone, but I'll just run through it real quick anyway. The committee meetings are open to the public. The public is invited to comment around 6:10. Today, I think it's about 6:05. We're hoping, well, we started late, so it'll be about 6:10. The chat box is open for introductions and public comment and to indicate your interest in giving public comment. The rest of the time, it's we ask that the public just chat to one of the PCEF staff only, and otherwise the chat box is for committee members. Folks can raise their hands and have your video on or off. When we have a lot of members of the public, we ask that folks keep their videos off just so that staff can kind of keep committee members in the view that we see, but that's not the case today. So I think, Jenny, if you feel like turning your video on, feel free. There is closed captioning available, and you find that by going to the menu bar at the top of your sort of Zoom window and the three little dots that give you an additional menu of things, and just that's where you can find the closed captioning. And this meeting is being recorded. So I'm just gonna open the meeting with, just gonna get my notes here real quick. I'm gonna open the meeting today by just recognizing that today is Veterans Day. Earlier today, the National Museum of the American Indian hosted an online program honoring Native veterans and marking the completion of the National Native American Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. The Museum of the American Indian described the design on their website by saying that, quote, the memorial design incorporates water for sacred ceremonies, benches for gathering and reflection, and 4 lances where veterans, family members, tribal leaders, and others can tie cloths for prayers and healing. The memorial creates an interactive yet intimate space for gathering, remembrance, reflection, and healing. It welcomes and honors Native American veterans and their families and educates the public about their extraordinary contributions. The memorial was designed by Harvey Pratt from the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, a multimedia artist, retired forensic artist, and Marine Corps Vietnam veteran. And just also a note also that Native American people serve in the U.S. Armed Forces at a higher rate than any other group of citizens in our country. That is the opening today. And so I'd like to invite folks to, I'd like to invite Jenny to introduce herself in the chat box. And I'm going to call on everyone else, as I always do, to introduce yourself. We'll start with committee members, and I think we'll start with Robin.
Good evening, Robin Wang, committee member, he, him.
Thanks, Robin. Megan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Horst, she, her, committee member.
Michael?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Michael Etten Hill, he, him, committee member.
Amanda?
Hi, everyone. Amanda, she, her, committee member.
Faith?
Hi, it's so good to see you all. It's been so long. Faith Graham, committee member, she, her.
Ramses?
Hi, everyone. Ramses Giannatino, Viatoro, he, him, committee member.
And Shanice?
Hello, Shanice Clark, committee member, she, her.
All right. And now we'll move on to staff, and we will start with James.
Everybody, good to see you all again. James Valdez, he, him pronouns, and PCEF startup team staff.
And Janet?
Good evening, everybody. Great to see you all. Janet Hammer, she, her, PCEF startup team.
June?
Hey everyone, June Reyes, PCEF staff use she, her pronouns. This is my first meeting in a few months, so I'm really excited to see you all again and kind of get in the groove.
And I am Katie Lister, PCEF staff. And now I will turn it over to Sam to introduce himself and the member of the public.
And I just, 1 second, how do I, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've messed up my screen. Sorry. Sam Brasso, PCEF staff, he, him, and I'm going to switch over and look at those that are on our line. We've got Jenny Hall here with us, she, her from the Energy Trust of Oregon, and because I know you, we've also got Angela Prevedelli, she, her with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Let me get my screens back right.
Sorry, I missed
Did I miss
Angela
anyone
there.
else? Oh.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay, well, it doesn't look like anyone has signed up for public comment. So we will move on to reviewing the agenda, which has following public comment, program updates. Sam is going to give those, and then we're going to have a discussion about committee reporting on program performance. Take a quick break, and then June is going to lead a discussion about engaging the public in our meetings. And then we'll get your closing comments and we will call it a day. Before we move on to the program updates, I would like to ask folks if they had an opportunity to review and had any comments or edits to or changes to the meeting minutes from 9/23. So not seeing anyone indicating any changes, we will call those accepted and move on to program updates. Sam, just let me know when you want me to advance the slide.
Sure. Great. So just first, it's been a long time, so I'm happy to see you all. I hope we get back in our regular rhythm. But it has been, I know we've been quiet with you all, but it has been an incredibly busy couple of months for us. And I'd say the country and everyone else in so many other ways. So we're just going to start with giving you all some updates around the RFP period. But before we jump into that, one of the things that I just wanted to start it with is just talking about, you know what, actually, let's go into the updates on the RFP period, and then we'll talk about the timeline, because I think that's an important piece. But I'd rather share a few stats around the RFP before we jump into the timeline. So during the, it's been about 7 weeks or so that we've been out with the RFP. We've hosted 6 webinars, informational webinars. Those are publicly accessible webinars. In addition to that, we've hosted a range of co-hosted webinars with community groups that have reached out, or that we've reached out to proactively and connected with around that have connected with specific, more culturally specific or tailored communities. So the 6 are really the publicly accessible webinars. Those have been recorded and posted online. We hosted 5 grant writing and budget development training workshops. Those have also been posted online. Across both of the webinars and grant trainings, we've had about 263 total attendees, representing 170 unique organizations, as well as at least 25 that we know of culturally specific organizations. Throughout the RFP, we've taken in questions largely through our webinars, but also through emails, through one-on-ones, through meetings, and taken note of those questions and answered them for the public and posted them to the website. And we've made those weekly postings available on Wednesdays, where we sort of say, this is the log of questions that came up last week, and here are all the answers. And so through that period, we've answered 156 clarifying questions on the RFP. Certainly a lot of questions that we'll be thinking about next year as we seek to provide more clarity up front, but have posted those, and those are all online, and we'll push out our latest update here shortly in terms of the last batch of questions and answers. So it's been something we've been pointing folks to go to as they have questions. And you'll see at the bottom here, just the language downloads in terms of translations. You'll see that's an area that we're going to have substantive work to do to think about how do we provide better access and think about collectively the experience with our translated content. The substantive downloads you'll see is at least in the Spanish language content, and then we've had a handful of downloads on the other language content. I will acknowledge that at least for the Thai and the Lao translated content, the individuals that requested that, we directly emailed them that content. So it may be that they didn't really go back to the website to download it since we sent that content directly to them. Nonetheless, I think there's going to be a future conversation, particularly with as we get to our next comment around just our new staff around how we think about making our translated content more accessible and how we think about that engagement overall. Okay, next slide. Through the webinars that we've hosted, we usually put on about 3 different polls, and this is just to get a sense from folks as they come into the webinars. You know, what is their sort of interest in applying for the different types of grant types? So you'll see that, you know, in the bottom right, there's a question we've asked in each of our webinars around what's the interest in, and generally speaking, there's been substantive interest across all the grant types, the planning grant, the small grant, and large grant. So it feels like at least we've struck the right balance, and certainly we expect based on this that we're going to see a good amount of interest in those planning grants as that did capture the most. I'll acknowledge that most folks in there indicated interest probably in more than one type of grant, so you'll probably see a good chunk of proposals you'll see multiple proposals from individual organizations as well, is what we suspect. In terms of grant experience, what we captured, at least in our webinars, is there's going to be a varying level of grant experience, and that's in the top left-hand corner, with at least half of the folks in those, and I'd say a strong majority having a good chunk of grant experience, but also not an insignificant sum having a smaller grant writing or grant application experience, 12%. And then at the end of our webinars, we always ask, how likely, after you've heard all of the content in terms of how to navigate this application and heard about the budget, the uses of funds, all the relevant information for the RFP, we'd ask just how likely are you to apply for the fund? And I mean, it's fortunate that at the very end of it, we still have a strong majority that are very likely and at least somewhat likely to apply for the funds. But you'll notice at least 13% of folks walk away and saying that they're unlikely to apply for funds at least this round. And then again, just a varying level at the bottom right, a varying level of experience around folks in terms of folks that have applied for grants. Okay. So I think let's get
I think Maria joined us, so maybe we could just take a quick a moment and let Maria introduce herself.
Thank you.
Hi, Maria Sippin, she, they pronouns, committee member.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. And Maria, I hope, thank you for being with us. I know you're not feeling well, so I appreciate that.
Tried to put the hair together real quick. So nice to see everyone though.
Thank you. So, what I think I want to and I don't want to move on from the stats that we presented there. So maybe I'll just stop and see if there are just initial questions about some of the information that we shared around that we received through the webinars around folks' engagement with this RFP, as well as just any of the numbers that we've shared in the last 2 slides. And maybe, Katie, can you advance the next slide so at least we can sit there, and Maria, you can at least do some of that.
Faith?
Sam, hey, thank you. Going to one of these webinars or trainings was not a requirement, right? So we could see a lot of different applications than folks that attended.
It wasn't, and I will say that it's been something that as we've gone through the process, I will acknowledge going through the webinars helps a lot. There's a lot. I mean, and being able to sit through them, just the feedback we've gotten from anyone that has gone through, it's generally the webinars and the content presentation has been about 45 minutes is really the front chunk where we're really walking through everything. And then really the last 45 minutes have really been focused on Q&A from the audience. And we've managed the question stack, and we just go through all the questions that we're getting. So it's been really helpful. I know in connecting with others that we haven't seen, folks have gone back and viewed the recordings. We post the recordings right afterwards. So I know that that's just because, this captures the number of folks that have attended the webinars, but we know folks have also gone back in and reviewed the recordings. It's feedback that we're thinking about when we've looked at the stats around the recordings. I think, June, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're seeing that the average person listening to the recordings are spending about 15 minutes looking at them. So, you know, an hour and a half sort of recorded session, and they're going back and viewing 15 minutes. So it's something I know we're thinking about next year in terms of, do we produce just a 10 to 15 minute video that anyone can access? That's here's everything you need to know. But it wasn't a requirement, but it's certainly strongly, it's something I've been having gone through it and having heard the feedback, that I know it's been really incredibly helpful for folks.
I'm just kudos for learning from the experience. So the idea of like creating a 6 to 10 to 15 minute video is such an awesome idea for next round. And I just want to also give kudos for posting everything to the website. I have not seen a public process ever go quite so smoothly and so transparently. And so I'm just super proud and happy that all of that stuff is getting posted quickly. So thank you.
And so the last piece I think that we did do is we've had a list of sort of groups, and this isn't cumulative, but this isn't exhaustive, but we've had a list of groups that we've sort of been our key target outreach audience. And so we tracked, did those groups show up to our webinars? And we did do personalized mailings to them to say, just, hey, checking in. We noticed you haven't signed up for any webinars or showed up to any webinars. Want to make sure that you know that these resources are available. So we've done that just additional check with folks to see how we can bring them in and let them know that those recordings are available. Okay. Robin.
Yeah, I'm just curious, any general high-level common themes that are coming back as feedback?
I frankly should have probably thought of this more before this evening.
Sorry.
No, it's a great question. To be frank, I don't feel like there is a singular common theme. And Katie, I'd look to you. I know you spent the bulk of time going through the questions and answering the questions. There's a robust set of questions in that stack of 150 questions. I know I'm coming back and thinking about just how do we sort of capture those questions and present that in future rounds so we get ahead of some of those pieces. But I don't have a particular common theme that's coming out of this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there is any either. There are definitely things that we see coming up, and we do intend to go back and do this analysis. I will say, and we kind of, set it up so that it would be not terribly difficult to do that, but still will take some time to kind of like code those narratives. But there were a number, there definitely were an array of different kinds of questions related to wage requirements, both the 180% of minimum wage and prevailing wage. So just like clarifications and what if it's an AmeriCorps volunteer, or what if it's a student who's also working, or what if it's like just kind of lots of different situations like that, or what if it's a project that, and a lot of people asking, is it possible to pay someone the PCEF required wage for the time that they are working, the 180% for the time they're working on the project, and not the time they're working on the project. And then for the rest of their time, just whatever wage they were earning before that might not meet that requirement. So there was a lot of wage stuff. I do think that is probably one that I saw pop up a lot. I think, as with all grant application processes, there were clarifying questions about how to fill out the budget. And so there was a lot of kind of like answering, like, no, put this, that here, and this is what that means, and put this over there. And we did have, one person fairly early on find a little mistake we made, and we corrected that and sent it out. And wasn't like something that should have derailed anyone, but yeah, those are the two I can think of now. But we definitely intend to do that analysis as part of kind of like an evaluation of the whole thing. And so we'll have more later, but those are the two I can think of off the top of my head. And I didn't see if Ranfis or Megan, I didn't see when your hands went up, but go ahead. Megan, you want to, or Ranfis, you're unmuted, go ahead.
I think Megan was first.
Okay.
So kind. I think probably my question is, you'll answer it the same way you just answered Robin's question, but I was curious about I think on the next slide, you mentioned 13% of people who attended the webinar did not plan to apply, something like that. Yeah, Sam mentioned that. And I'm just curious if you got a sense of why, but maybe your answer is the same as what you just said.
No, we did it. I mean, we didn't, and it's something that I think it's something I'd love to go back and tease out, because we do have a survey that we ask folks to complete after they've submitted an application, but that obviously doesn't capture those that have decided not to go through that process. So that's something we're thinking about. Unfortunately, we at least have the registrations of everyone that's registered for this, so we'll think about how to check back in with that group. But I mean, it was early on in the webinars. I think as we got to the end and you had the trailing questions and we were lingering and we were like, any questions? We noticed people would log off, and then we'd do that exit poll. So we got better towards the end of doing that exit poll right at the end and saying, hey, answer this for us. But it was always at the end, so there wasn't really as much of an engagement around it, unfortunately.
Francis, did you still have a question?
Yeah, well, one, just wanted to thank you all for doing all this hard work. Again, like most, grant programs don't do this step of doing either a webinar or even an in-person conference. And I think it's a really critical part here in this first year. So just want to appreciate all the work that you all are doing on this and answering all these questions. I think some of my questions, could probably be, I'll welcome to follow up. I'm just kind of curious if all the folks who signed, if everyone who attended these webinars provided, filled out the survey. So if this is a representation of a full 170 plus responses, and then just kind of curious, like, of this breakdown, whether these organizations fit sort of and I know we don't have a set definition yet, but just like, if they fit like a new or a small or emerging organization. I don't think I expect that kind of breakdown now, but just kind of curious if you have that, had that kind of information as you've aggregated. And I'll stop there. I have just maybe one more question after that.
Yeah, I'll say that, as we turn on the polls, whenever you sort of launch the poll, we would always, my general pulse was always to wait until at least 3/4 of the participants in the call responded before closing out the poll. Generally try to go higher than that, but it's sort of a game of like, how long do you wait? Well, someone may have stepped away or whatever else. And so I would anecdotally, the gut, I would say at least that number left, these stats represent at least 3/4 of the participants that were in the meeting at that given time. And so, and as far as sort of the sense on the kind of organizations that are there, I frankly think maybe if you looked at sort of I've applied to how many grants or I have experience, that might, I don't know if that frankly directly translates to the kind of experience they have applying to grants. Anecdotally looking, you had the entire gamut of them. I kind of have I just scan and look at a few, but I'd say it was fairly representative of both big and certainly small, all the way down to single volunteer groups. But I don't have really statistics around what that representation actually looked like. And I think that's something that we do, like I said, we do have the full list of who signed up. And so there may be something that we can go back to and think about whether that's easy enough for us to categorize, but I suspect it might not be as well. So we'll look at that and see if that's an effort that we can do easily.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. I would just, I would just encourage maybe each of our committee members, if each of you have time, just to check out these webinars. I tried to attend one live, but I just couldn't. So I just ended up clicking on the recordings, and I think it was great. And I think it was just kind of just illuminating just to hear some of the questions, like very specific nitty-gritty details for like very project specific. And I think it just always makes, at least for me as a committee member, just makes me appreciate just the complexity of this work, and just I think just that those opportunities that present themselves to help refine this process to be as user friendly as possible, but just kind of appreciating how even when you get to very technical project by project, like some of these questions are really kind of hard to answer. So I appreciate the responses, and I think the one that stands out, and Katie kind of listed it, was like the wage requirements So, you know, I'm kind of, you know, curious in the long term with some of these questions, like as you're responding to some of these questions, are these responses things that we as a committee should be tracking, or are these things that staff will revisit as you're answering them that help inform or shape the application since we last touched on it? And that's my last question. So I'll stop from there. Yeah.
I will say there's a good chunk of them that we want. I mean, I think we'll detail out we will summarize and do that, come back to you all with that evaluation. And I think a good chunk of them we expect to look to you all to say, what do you want to dig into more based on the sort of questions that come up? I mean, some of them obviously are just code. It's code implementation. It's sort of it's taking the code and implementing the code. So there's a certain wiggle room, but I suspect that a good chunk of them we will definitely be bringing back and having more robust discussions around. So that's something that as we kind of get to the end of this and we tease out what worked well, what didn't, what are the questions that came up, what is the ambiguity that still exists. That's certainly, I mean, before we get to the 40 to 60 million, it'll be really important that we start to we work in clarifying those. Okay. Well, I think the other piece of the update that I think that is relevant to at least the work that we've been doing within the RFP is that, you know, as you all know, the deadline was originally scheduled to be this coming Monday, and as I'm framing, I think you have a sense for where I'm going. It's going to be scheduled for this coming Monday, November 16th, 11:59. Having checked in with a handful of groups, and I think just acknowledging a lot of the real prolonged anxiety that frankly last week created across the community collectively, we have decided to push the deadline out 1 week. And so that's something that we're going to push out in communications here in just a little bit, but that will push everything out just a little bit, and probably it'll push everything out about a week to 2 weeks, and in part just because of when we run into the holidays. Essentially, we'll have a 1 week delay in when we distribute assignments for the scoring panels, and because some of the assignments in the scoring panels, you know, that period will take a little bit of time. We're probably going to add a week in that period since it'll span Christmas and New Year's. And then we're going to have a week after, you know, there'll still be the week for the applicant feedback. So we expect that what this shift will do by way of some of the work is that it'll push out essentially the meeting of the scoring panels to happen sometime between January 5th and January 14th in the new year. And so, and what that would do is that would essentially push the recommendations from the committee to City Council to be happening in the last week of January 25th to 29th. So assuming that after the scoring panel work is done, then we bring it back to the full committee in that middle of January period. So that's just, I just wanted to make sure you all, and I'd love to, I mean, I welcome thoughts on that. I mean, this wasn't it certainly wasn't light, but I think what we acknowledge is there's a privilege in being in the position that we're in. And throughout this RFP, we've consistently told folks, sorry, we're delaying, sorry, we're delaying, sorry, we're delaying. And we wrestled with, okay, now that folks are asking us to delay for a range of very real reasons, I think it's fair to respond, but it was sort of this tricky, what's meaningful. And I think we sort of think the pulse that we've gotten is that this would be meaningful, because there's at one point a discussion on whether we go further, and that ended up pushing things far enough that folks we got the sense that folks weren't as open to that. Okay, I think Ramfis's hand go first.
Oh, sorry. I guess question is, do we have a sense yet of how many folks have submitted an application at this point? And then I guess my follow-up question, is there anything that we as a committee can do to help with turnout and applications, whether it's social media or doing, promoting this in our networks? Like what are things that we can do to help?
Well, we'll do as soon as we post the extension. I'll check in with our communications folks. We'll at least have social media pushed out. And what I can do is turn that at least, and for those who are active there, make sure that you all are aware of that. I mean, it's from the BP, it's from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Twitter handle. And so I will at least, I can share that tomorrow. We'll also, just even forwarding our email to folks. I know I've checked in, and we'll certainly connect with the PCEF Coalition, have them push that out through their networks and just other networks as well. I suspect that we're going to have a pretty robust number of applications. I just, the sense that I have is we'll be in a good position.
Yeah, and I'll just note, just as an update, we do have one submitted application, and that is for a large grant, and it was an applicant who received an application support grant. So that's good. That's nice. And then in total, we have 58 that are currently in process in the application portal. And we have a pool on how many what the total is going to be within the staff. So, but we don't know. We know we have 58 today in process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Robin?
Can we get into the pool?
You can have your own pool.
Okay. So just a quick question. Can you tell us if we're going to block out some time on our calendars? Can you tell us about roughly when we should just kind of pencil out some time?
Katie, you want to?
Yeah, so it's going to, originally the independent scoring was going to happen December 7th to December 25th. And that's like, if you're on a scoring panel, that's the most time consuming part, because it's when you need to read through all of the applications and actually get into the portal and do the scoring. And so with a delay of a week, we sit now we are sitting like squarely in the kind of like week of Christmas and week of the New Year, which is why we thought we need to extend that period, just because people have other things going on. So December 14th, it would be the date that you would be receiving kind of your assignments, your scoring panel packet, which would have all of your, which applications you'll be scoring in them. And then those would be due, hold on one second, with the reviews, with the idea of having the reviews done by January 11th. Then we would need, then there's like a week, like Sam talked about, where the applicants, and we will email this all out to you. We could even send you like calendar invites to save those dates on your calendars. But there's a week, that week after January 11th is when the applicants have the opportunity to provide feedback, so you won't do anything then. And then as soon as we get that feedback and staff is able to kind of, process it and get it ready for the scoring panels, then we will schedule meetings with all of the scoring panels. Each scoring panel meeting should probably take about 2 hours. And so just depending on people's schedules, like those could all happen in the same week, potentially. It is possible that they, because of scheduling, it might take another week, but with hoping to have a firm deadline of having those all done by the beginning / middle, first or second week of February. But that's a less of a time commitment for y'all, because if you're on one scoring panel, it's 1 2-hour meeting. If you're on 2 scoring panels, then it's 4 hours.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh, and actually, and maybe just the last part would be that the committee meeting to finalize the recommendations then comes after, like once we have everything done, then we need to schedule the committee meetings where everybody comes together. And I imagine we'll have to do that in 2 meetings. I mean, I think if we were in regular times, we might try and spend the whole day together, but spending the whole day together over Zoom feels not not fun. So. And
I'll just add this one, it's separate from that, but in terms of the numbers themselves, we've been advising everyone not to work in the application portal. And to work in their, whatever collaborative documents that they want to work in. And so that 58 may not be the net. So if you are going to make a betting pool, no, keep that in mind. That folks may not have started into the portal yet. So it's been quiet, but it's been really busy. It's maybe what I want to share. And I think the other updates, I'd love to, the other updates I want to share is we've been actively working on hiring. And so we've got, we're working and I've got essentially, I'll just share that we've got an offer out that I need to be able, I'll be able to pull an offer letter over to the individual that we're going to offer for our communications position here, hopefully by the end of the week, but at least extended a verbal off, working through that, maybe what I should share. And then we've got an offer out for our grants analyst position. And this is the individual that's going to be supporting our project managers. We haven't begun interviews for our green infrastructure and regenerative ag project manager positions. And these have just been pulling together the interview panels and working through. What I'll say has been, I think in sum, across all of our positions, we've had over 500 applications to work through at this point. And so our regenerative ag and green infrastructure project manager positions, fingers crossed, Megan, if all goes well. I know you're on the interview panel for that. That'll begin next week. And then we'll turn our attention to our workforce and contractor equity, workforce and contractor development project manager position probably in a couple of weeks later. So we're trailing a little bit, and we've also got we also wrapped up. Hopefully, we'll wrap up recruitment for our financial analysts soon too. So it's been a busy time, but I just want to call each of those positions out. It's a grants analyst, a communications coordinator, communications manager, regenerative ag and green infrastructure project manager, workforce and contractor development project manager, as well as a financial analyst. And then my sense is in January sometime we'll open up an admin support recruitment. And let's see where else. Okay, I mean, those are the big pieces. There's other pieces obviously that are continuing in the background. I think we'll have more of an update. At least I'll try to make a more regular update around just our engagement around workplace safety. But that's been conversations that we've been actively engaging in as well more recently. And so I think we'll bring more of a we'll wrap that up. I mean, in a more comprehensive update our next meeting. But I want to just acknowledge that that's active work that's happening as well. So are there any questions about those updates?
Hey.
Hey.
So one project, you're hoping to have one project manager for each of the different buckets.
You know, at least in the future, certainly. I mean, we can talk about the clean energy bucket. There's a lot of work there, and having an individual, at least in the clean energy, you know, Wendy Kelfkin is in that role right now. But I think in the future, I mean, there's other conversations to have, particularly around our administrative structure, which I think I want to bring to the committee when we get to a place where we can support that. And I just want to, maybe I'll give a sense for, we will be turning on our financial, we'll be pivoting to beginning our first year, really looking back our financial audit for the first 15 months of the program in early 2021. And that's where we'll start digging into just, and probably getting more of an opinion around the way we break down our administrative and program expenses, because it's a conversation I'm not quite ready to support now, but it'll be the point. So I think what I'm acknowledging is for the work that's being asked, we're going to need more program positions in the future. I think, or we're going to have to really think about just how we are administering the program. But right now it's one project manager for each of those funding buckets, not including the innovation bucket.
Francis?
Yeah, I think as a community member, I'd love to continue that future conversations around just staff capacity, because I think that's one of my biggest concerns overall in the implementation of this program is just having enough capacity to really steward a program as large as this with the expectation of sort of transformative relationships with our community. So I appreciate the work and continue to, as a committee member, just want to convey that interest of how we add that needed capacity in this organization.
And maybe just to clarify, it's a point that's worth really, I mean, it's, right now the program, within the initiative is limited in terms of our program. The administrative expenses are limited to 5% of the fund. And so, we've budgeted conservatively at the bottom range of the fund, but as we start to get a better sense for the fund, that'll just have 5% is still a limiting number, where I think even if we were to say the fund was at 60 million, it's still a challenging number. And it depends on how we really classify what are administrative expenses versus program expenses. So there's a little bit of work there because there isn't a clear framework for that. And that's the reason is, we're required to do a financial audit annually, a performance audit biannually. And so that's where we'll start to dig into those questions. And bring that back certainly to the committee. Okay. I think we're a little bit behind, but I think I think we might be at a fair place to move pass this on to you, Katie.
Okay, thanks. And I don't want to eat into the time for June's part of the agenda after the break. So I'm gonna go through my slides and maybe just like relatively quickly, and then we might have to just leave the conversation before it's over so that we can get to so that we don't end up having to abandon the second part of the agenda, which I think is an important one to have right now. So these are the committee responsibilities. So the first two slides in this portion of the presentation relate to committee responsibilities. One that the code gives you, that the ballot initiative gives you, and one that just sort of, and then others that then the second slide are the guiding principles, which are responsibilities that you've given to yourself. So there's this responsibility to adopt a methodology to measure, track, and report to the public, the mayor, and the city council the effectiveness of the programs in implementing the city's climate action plan in a manner that supports social, economic, and environmental justice, including developing a diverse and well-trained workforce and contractor pool in the field of energy efficiency, renewables, green energy initiatives generally. So that's just a reminder, and y'all can read, but I wanted to make sure that all of those words were said out loud because they are all in the code, and as one of the things that the committee is tasked with doing. And the committee has also given itself the responsibility of ensuring that we're implementing the program in a way that is focused on climate action, justice-driven, community-powered, and accountable. These are your guiding principles. So now just to jump back to April, this was a conversation, and Amanda, this is new to you, so we can actually, I'll follow up with an email that has like the memo that we sent from this meeting as well to give you a little bit more context. But back in April, we did have a conversation about some performance metrics and what it might look like. What are you going to bring to council every year to say, this is how the program is performing? What are we going to be tracking over time? Definitely noting that there's a ton of other data that is being collected as a part of grant implementation and program administration. But we're not going to be bringing all of that to council. They have limited bandwidth, and we really want to be able to sort of essentialize what sort of program success looks like. These were the recommendations at that very high level that sort of staff presented to you guys in April. And looking back through the minutes from that meeting, there were some of the sort of main comments I think that the committee gave us after that conversation reflected a desire for metrics to be meaningful and to be actually measuring change in the things that we want to see change, and a desire for a greater detail in the demographics of populations participating in the program, whether they were participating as workers, as project beneficiaries, or as grant recipients. So, hold on, Sam, I need 3 screens. I only have 2. This is a the problem. Hold on one second, you guys. So then now that that was the kind of deep dive that we took, but now just stepping back to kind of like reorient ourselves on the purpose. The first two slides were about kind of like what your responsibility related to reporting is. And now we're kind of asking you all to think about how do we measure the effectiveness of the program in a way that aligns with the purpose and goals in the ballot measure that are now part of the code and that align with the guiding principles and that are metrics that are actually meaningful and measurable. The two categories of areas down there of areas of program performance are just sort of things to get you thinking. There's sort of the ways that we as staff think about potentially measuring program performance. There's this sort of program administration. I know that was something that Andrea Hamburg, when she was on the committee, spoke a fair amount about, wanting to make sure that we were measuring success in program administration and not just measuring the success of projects that were grant funded, that there's important things in both of those components. So the areas of program performance are sort of broken out into these two categories, one program administration and one that is sort of grant project / grant program performance. We also heard from the committee and definitely agree as staff that we want to tell the story using both qualitative and quantitative information, data and stories. The two screen grabs on the right-hand side are from Portland Children's Levy. It's just an example of their annual report, which is published online, has a data dashboard, and then is just followed by a lot of grantee stories. PCEF's distinct funding areas make it hard to have a meaningful, like one single meaningful dashboard, right? Because like Megan pointed out last time, one of the metrics that we floated was number of trees planted. And she was like, there's nothing in there about regenerative ag. That reflects that funding bucket, but it doesn't at all, it's not relevant for one whole piece of work that we're going to be doing, isn't reflected in those high buckets. So one idea is that each of the funding areas could have its own data dashboard, and then program administration would have an individual dashboard as well. And then taken as a whole, those would be how the program is performing. So if we are seeing that we're failing in one area, we're like, we need to pay attention to that and kind of tweak that to try and get that up. And so it's a larger number of metrics to track, but I don't think, hopefully we won't end up with something totally unmanageable. So this is just an example. And again, these metrics are just put out here to get you all thinking and to give you something to chew on. But so this could be an example for program administration. There would be a 1 or a 2 pager that would have metrics specific to program administration, like the number of grants, number of applicants, dollars awarded, applicant experience, grantee experience, nonprofit capacity building, community engagement, and then a story that kind of speaks to or reflects the work on program administration. And some of these we're definitely going to have to, some of these are ones that we're just going to have to tell council, or we might as well, because otherwise we'll be asked like how many dollars we awarded and things like that. But it is, I think, important when thinking about all of these metrics is to think about how they tie back to the language in the code that sort of that says we're supposed to, be implementing the climate action plan in a way that is, and then kind of all of the stuff that comes after that, and also tying it back to the guiding principles. Like, are these metrics measuring, are these metrics measuring something that is advancing racial justice, or are they measuring something that is addressing climate change? Those are the questions to be asking as we think about metrics. And there are more metrics to choose from than we kind of have the capacity to track and report. So we do want to, be thoughtful in how we're talking about the program. These just some examples of funding area. data and stories. So there would be for each of the funding areas, you know, metrics like for clean energy, GHG reduced, kilowatt hours saved or generated, therm saved by fuel type displaced, those sorts of things. We do recognize here that it's likely that we would need to separate green infrastructure from regenerative agriculture and probably workforce development from contractor support. And so there would be just because they're distinct. And then having stories that reflect work in each of those funding areas. So all of that said, all of the metrics on this slide, where we're talking about funding area data and stories, none of that is really available until we have grants that are funded and have done their thing and reported and are completed. And so we're really looking at kind of the middle of 2022. But we probably need to report to council on the performance of the program before then. And so that just kind of led us to ask the question, like, when does that reporting happen and what should be included? So reporting on program startup, I think, or characterizing or reporting on program development or something like that seems like an appropriate kind of thing to do at this point. These are some ideas of what might be included in that reporting to council. Committee formation, RFP release, community engagement activities, applications received, recommendations for funding made, guiding principles, applicant experience. So some of the stuff that is on the administrative, that was on the, noted on the slide that was about the administrative program performance, but none of the stuff that is related to the funding buckets. And then this is the last slide. So I caught us up on time by just talking real fast at everyone. Ways to get from here to there. Timing considerations that we probably want to report on program administration, including program developments when grant recommendations are made. So it says January 2021. Now that's probably going to be February 2021 with the delay, but still pretty soon. And then reporting on grant program project performance should definitely be well defined before the next RFP, which we have not yet sort of nailed down any sort of date for, but anticipate will be sometime summer 2021. So those are the kind of timing considerations. The two ideas for how to get from here to there are to form a subcommittee to define and manage reporting that comes from the committee. And that would probably be like an ongoing subcommittee that would be active when it needed to be active and then kind of be dormant when it didn't need to be active, but would be ongoing. Or alternatively, have staff draft material for full committee deliberations, or a third other idea. So we have now 13 minutes before the break. So I just wanted to, I think the main task for you guys tonight, if we can ask something of you related to this, is to think about how you would like to get from here to there. Just what path we want to take. Do you want staff to, dig in and do more work and get things further along in development, or do you want to form a subcommittee and kind of do that with us? Maria?
Thanks for your presentation. I think this is along the lines of what June may present, but since PCEF staff have healthy and open communication channels with community, I think it would be worthwhile to also find out what community would like to evaluate about the program and other things they might be interested in, getting some metrics for. I know we have the coalition and other interested parties who continue to engage and want to shape the direction of the program. So I'd like to see how they want to get involved as well.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. A thumbs up from Ramses.
Yeah, I just want to also give a verbal thumbs up to Maria. I think that's totally spot on. And maybe there's even an opportunity to have a subcommittee that includes folks from this committee, because I think that will bring us along faster, and other community members.
So a subcommittee with community member participation. Yeah, we would. So the only, I guess the caveat there is we would just have to limit the number of you guys who were able to be on the committee, so we didn't become a public meeting. But that's a great idea.
And Faith, maybe if I can ask, sorry, Megan, I didn't mean to jump in. Faith, if I could just quickly ask, when you think that so we can kind of brainstorm a little bit, and we can also brainstorm this and just come back to you. When you think about it, I know that there's ways in which we can bring active calls into the community and make that a subcommittee meeting where we're bringing community in, and we can kind of set the agenda that it'll be these many meetings, and so folks have a sense for consistently showing up, or maybe as I'm thinking about, I think we can formulate and think about those, what that can look like, and come back to you all. Actually, it's not as much a question. I think we can frame that out a little bit and come back and shape out what that could look like.
Megan?
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for the presentation. And it seems really thoughtful, nice graphics, a kind of nice, like easy to follow story. Just to respond to like the prompts on this particular slide, and building off of what Maria and Faith said, given the importance of like what we report on, it seems important to me that a subcommittee be involved. Otherwise, it seems like we'd only sort of hear about it once after you've all done a lot of thinking, and that might not be the most robust way for us to really be thinking about it. So I do like the idea of a subcommittee and with engaged community members. Just that way, a few of us are really giving it deeper attention.
Any other thoughts? Randy?
Yeah, I think I support what everyone said. You know, I probably am kind of like landing on a hybrid model here of, you know, staff wants to give like sort of initial framework, and, you know, that we have sort of subcommittee to sort of be able to respond to and provide feedback. And I think it's really important to get community feedback and participation in these subcommittees as well, as you all are thinking about it. But I off the top of my head think about like construction, on anything construction related on the clean energy side. Like we have a lot of experts in the field within both workforce equity and contract equity practitioners who say these are the kinds of things that are the industry standards and key areas that we know that allows us to paint a good picture around and be able to assess how effective PCEF or other agencies are doing around equity. That allows us to provide further feedback down the road. So, you know, I imagine that we have those same experts, whether it's on regenerative agriculture, whether it's around energy efficiency, things that we're not thinking now that we can think down the road. So I do see a lot of that value, and it really ties into our, you know, principle, you know, guiding principles. So I do look to staff to sort of think through how we can avoid some you know, not having a quorum. So I'm supportive of that, but I agree with everyone, like in terms of let's find a process that gets us working together, gets community feedback, and gets us to hit our deadlines on time.
So yeah, so I guess just to make sure that staff is understanding exactly what's being requested. So we will we'll go back and do a little bit more thinking and come back with a proposal for a sort of just basically like what the subcommittee would kind of look like, and when they would do their work, and how they would do their work, and how the committee would be, or how the community would be involved with that work. And then the committee would be able to if you liked the proposal, you would form a subcommittee, and people would volunteer to be on it and be confirmed on it by you all, and then we would go on from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And my only 2 cents on this is don't make the subcommittee be so broad to do all of the things. You know, I think try to find a model that works, that helps people on their very specific expertise or niches, and not create a space where, and I'll just speak for what I've noticed is like construction takes up a lot of space. So I don't want to find a mode that I think gets to kind of feed the expertise that we would want or expect from the community on this.
Robin?
Yeah, I'm a supporter of everything. I think the only comment is maybe give some latitude to the actual subcommittee in terms of how they interact with staff and going forward. So I don't think there's a need to have staff defined down to, you know, the details, you know, how that engagement will be. So work with the subcommittee to kind of figure out how that's going to work out.
Faith?
I'm sorry I'm taking up so much airspace today. I was going to agree with Robin and say it feels a little process heavy right now. You might be able to call for a committee right now, and those people could get together next week and decide how they wanted to proceed.
I don't know if we can do that. You guys can do that.
I'd like to call for a subcommittee.
Okay.
Second.
So that's the proposal. Faith made a proposal to form. Oh, Sam took in a deep breath. Sam, did you want to?
No. I wanted
okay.
to clarify, but I think you're about to do that, so go for it.
Okay, so yeah, Faith made a proposal to form a subcommittee focused on committee reporting to whomever. I feel focused on committee reporting, and Rand Feast seconded it. And so I'm gonna, sorry, go ahead.
And so maybe can I get clarification so that can I just clarify with you, Faith, what that would look like, at least at a high level. So this would be a subcommittee that would come together and then really discuss how you all want to bring community members into this layout, sort of obviously all the various areas and tease out what that's going to look like. Okay, that's just wanted to clear. So that it's really we're punting that work and thinking through those next steps to the subcommittee.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take a moment to let Amanda know, since this is her first decision with the committee, that the committee works on a consensus model. And so all of there are proposals, and then there's usually a second if there's not additional sort of questions or discussion that is needed, then we ask everyone to agree or stand down. I always forget the exact language. James is much better at remembering this. So agree, which is essentially saying yes. Stand aside, which indicates that you think that it's the best thing for the group, even though you might not personally think it's the very best thing, but it counts as a yes. Or you can block, which is a no vote. And a decision of this committee is reached when 2/3 majority of present members agree to the proposal, and with never fewer than 5 members agreeing. So we can explain more or send you a little, we'll just send you a novel about the committee to read before to get us to speed. So I'm just gonna ask folks to, I'm gonna call on folks and ask if you agree, stand aside, or block the proposal that Faith has made and Rand Feast has seconded. Michael?
I'll say affirmative.
Maria?
I support.
Robin,
I support.
Shanice,
I support.
Amanda,
I support.
and Megan.
I support.
Okay, so we have formed a committee which now needs members. So I'm wondering who amongst you would like to volunteer to be on this newly formed committee?
Michael, your screen looks different than ours, so we don't know who you're pointing to.
I know, I just realized that I can point like to somebody, but it's not really
Yeah.
pointing to a different person for each of you. So that's
I see Maria's hand up. So Maria has volunteered. Ramfis and Megan. Okay. Faith?
Katie, we can't have more than 3, right? Or
We can
4?
have 4.
Cool.
Yeah. So we do have room for one more if there is interest.
With that noted, I'm happy to make space if there's anyone who wants to participate. I just want to note my interest, but I'm glad to defer to anyone else who would want to be on the committee.
I personally think 3 is a great number, and however, I will also volunteer that if you want additional assistance and you decide after your first meeting that you do, I'd be happy to do that as well. The one other thing, and Ramfis, to your point that you made before we went to a vote, I think that the committee should feel free to call on any of the committee members for those issue-specific areas, right? So I hope that you'll reach out, and if there's anything that you know someone else has expertise on.
Okay. Oh, Michael?
I know this is out of line, but at some point in the future, speaking of committees, I think I'm a working agreements committee of 1 right now. So just for future reference.
It's something I had meant to mention during the program, during just a few of the updates, but yes, you are alone now, and so that's something that in the next meeting we'll tee up. And just as a reminder for folks to be starting to continue to think about the co-chair roles, but we wanted to give Amanda. We were thinking we'd give Amanda a few rotations before we bring that back up. But that's right. So if this might not be a bad opportunity to acknowledge that Michael is on a single person committee right now, which actually is not a committee. Cannot be one, but we need at least another person to join the committee, which is focused on the committee's bylaws as well as working agreements.
All right. Well, we are, Amanda?
Yeah, I'm curious, how many committees are there within this committee or within this group?
Well, there was a committee that was working a lot on developing the application questions for a while, but that committee, there's not really a need for it now that there will be again, but there's not a need for it at the moment. And then there's the bylaws committee. And Sam, you had 3, and now there's. It
was the recruitment committee, which was about bringing you on, Amanda. Mm-hmm.
So some of them are ongoing and some of them end.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely catch up and definitely find my footing once I learn more about everything that's happening, but definitely showing interest in the committee that Michael is on by himself.
Okay. I'll follow up on that.
Anything else before our break? Okay, it's 7:13 right now, so we're going to reconvene at 7:18, and we'll hand the mic over to June at that time. All right. Hopefully everyone is ready for the next part of the meeting.
So should we start?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like most every, yeah, looks like, I think Megan and Ramses may not be immediately back, but they'll be back soon. They can catch up.
Okay. Cool. So Katie, just an FYI, my internet is not working well. So if you can call on folks when I ask for thoughts, because I am unsure who is ready to talk. So thanks everyone for being here this evening. So I'm going to be leading a conversation on engaging the public in our meetings, although I kind of took this prompt to be just how does the committee engage the public? So we're having this discussion because it was prompted by Maria and Sam and wanting to discuss how the community is weaved into the workings of the committee. And when I think back into the community-powered and justice-oriented guiding principle, and where we are with the RFP right now, it's a really great time to pause and think about how we want to show up, how you guys want to show up as a committee to community. And so when I talk about community in this context, I'm talking about the folks that are being served by the PCEF program in the city of Portland. So Maria, before I kind of go into the next slide, did you want to add anything about why we're having this conversation?
Sure. Thank you for digging into this. I know you and Sam immediately reached out when I would bring up comments about how we can engage communities. We went from really rich discussions and interactions in our in-person meetings, sharing dinners with community members, being able to chat before and after meetings, and then going to this Zoom model where we log in just on time and log out immediately after the meeting. So we've been trying to think through ways that community members can still get that interaction and, how to go beyond our public meeting segment, public comment segment where they chime in a specific amount of time and, there's not so much interaction after that. So I just wanted to figure out how we can do this, since I know a lot of people used to attend wanting to get to know community members and committee members alike and staff. And now trying to adjust to this platform and other ways we can get people involved and interested in what happens in this space. So thank you, June, for reaching out to people and for thinking about the comments I've shared and all the other folks have shared. I think this is a presentation we've been looking forward to for a while, and just call on us if there's anything else we can do for you.
Awesome, thanks, Maria. Great. Katie, can you go to the next slide?
And June, just before you start, I should note, unfortunately, Shanice is sick this evening and had to roll off. And so I know she was really looking forward to this, and so we'll be sending her the video of this, but I just want to acknowledge that for the committee and public.
Great, I'm glad someone's going to watch this video. Shout out to Shanice while you're watching this video. So I think the essential question for this portion is thinking about what it looks like when community leads PCEF. So I'm trying to see if we can put ourselves in a place of what we want to achieve, and then we can figure out the ways we can get there, because this is going to be an iterative process that we keep trying. And so it's also going to look, how we engage with folks is going to look different based on the time we're in, right? And so with our current capacity, our staff, et cetera, how we engage tomorrow is going to be different from a year from now, from 5 years from now, but we need to think about it today to make those things possible. And so before I ask you to reflect on this question of what it looks like when community leads PCEF, I talked to a few folks, one including Jenny, who is also on this call, and asked them to share their thoughts of how it's been engaging with this committee. So Katie, can you hit the next slide? Let's see. So I also sent folks an email that kind of talks through some of this feedback. So I'm going to give some of the highlights here. So I talked with 7 different people who've gone to both in-person meetings and virtual meetings. Folks who range from, being from a nonprofit that serves communities of color to, ones that have a broader mainstream sort of focus, to folks who also represent, who come from a utility, for example. So that's, it's definitely wasn't a scientific task, but it was a one to try to get a range of opinions on how they're experiencing their relationship with the committee. And so when I asked folks why they came to PCEF committee meetings, most everyone said they came wearing multiple hats. So as someone who was a community member wanting to stay informed, as someone who wanted to come to make their work better when they went back to their workplace, to folks who were, coming because their nonprofit allowed them to be there, and they would bring back some of those conversations that you all are having back into their group. Also, so folks so there are some folks who are talking about how being part of the committee meetings and going to them, a big part of it is being able to pass on that information. And so then I also asked, how's it engaging with the committee? Is it easy? Everyone's favorite part of the meeting is public comment, because it probably isn't, but it's an opportunity for us to hear from the community, and it's sort of their platform to do so. And so what I heard about public comment is that, it feels like, yeah, it's a good place and a catch-all for folks to come in to the meeting because they know it's always going to be there. But it also is intimidating. So being able to have different ways of engaging is really important. Other things, they don't think you all are intimidating. So I think most folks were like, no one seemed unapproachable. In person, it was nicer because then they got to see you all and be there with you. But right, we can't do that right now. And when I talk to folks about the in-person space versus virtual space, I mean, it's not a surprise that some folks were like, kind of feels like C-SPAN watching the committee meetings. And so how do we provide ways to make it more engaging for folks to be part of our virtual space together? And some other things I wanted to mention is that people do though enjoy that they can come into the virtual meetings more easily because they can log in from home. But they do miss that community aspect of being able to go to different community centers to have this committee meeting. All right. I have a few more things here before I will open it up to you all to provide any comments. Folks also like that we begin the meetings with an opening quote or having a moment to kind of center ourselves in the kind of work that we want to do, and that it's always different. And then in answering this question around what is your ideal relationship with the committee, folks, or someone had said that they see the space together as a movement space where we all get to know each other. And that could be a hub or just a community space. And the kind of, and that folks, they want to have a relationship with folks in the committee. They want to get to know folks, and they like that people on the committee come from community and would like to see committee members embedded into community. And so some asks and offers that I also heard is that all, like everyone I talked to, they were like, any of the committee members can, call on me and I'm here to support them, maybe like for some folks, they said that they're not, like, some folks are not conflicted out, so they wouldn't be applying for a PCEF grant, but they're there to help answer questions and guide folks through any, through subjects that they know about. Someone also mentioned the feedback loop is important. When we're thinking about how much content we have in our meetings versus engagement, when we have a public comment, for example, there isn't that time that we create for you all to respond to the comments. And so sometimes it can feel like, oh, well, what happened to the comment that I made? So there's this desire to have that feedback loop. So from what you all are hearing from folks in the community, if you can respond to that, that was an ask. And then folks also liked the learning space that you all had sort of in the beginning of when we had those meetings, for example, on energy efficiency. And so they felt like they could learn along with you all and sort of get that space of knowledge. And so, you know, for someone, they said that they really liked how this was a learning space for them. And so folks just really want to get to know you, want to know more about your expertise. We're also saying, hey, we could do breakout rooms in the beginning and meet with a committee member and just talk with them to get to know them. So that's a summary of what I've heard. And I wanted to see, before we jump into the next thing, if y'all had any questions about that. You all are frozen on my screen, so I'm not quite sure. Can someone respond like, no, there's no questions?
I'm looking around. There's no questions.
Okay. All right. So can we go to the next? Oh, actually, wait. Don't go anywhere, Katie. So on the bottom right, I put a little sticky with a pin because those are things we're going to put a pin on. We're not going to talk about today, but folks did talk about how they wanted some guidance for engaging with other folks within the space, learning spaces, and wanted a place to connect with grantees. So now we can go on to the next slide. All right. So sorry, I keep freezing. Back to the essential question of what does it look like when community leads? So whatever you want to do, we're going to have 3 minutes of more silence. So to think about this question. And so I'm going to read these prompting questions, and I'm going to give you a chance, about 3-ish minutes for some personal processing, and then we're going to have a group discussion. Maybe I actually might only have 1 or 2 shares only, so we can get on to the next thing. But I want us to start with thinking about our virtual meeting space as a metaphor for community. So if we're thinking about how we want to set up the space and our aspirations for what we want our community to be like, think of this virtual space as it. Also think about being open to possibilities of what we're doing well now and what it looks like with community leading in a year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And think about a space that invites both, a range of expressions from negative, neutral, positive, so that we can invite not just, the positive and great things, but be able to provide a space for dissent and for folks to kind of really talk through things or think about different ideas. So even though my video is freezing, I'm going to try this thing where I have a 3-minute timer on my camera here. And I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to just really think about these questions and write down your thoughts. So there you go. one. I think we only have time for maybe 2 shares. If Katie, you can call on 2 folks who are volunteering.
You might be on mute, Katie.
You are correct. I was on mute and I was calling on people and I saw Amanda's hand go up and then Maria's. Amanda.
Yeah, one thing that I really found useful in my area of work this past like 9 months is the use of social media, especially Facebook, like going Facebook Live. We actually found more interaction with community through social media than any other platform. So less people tuned in on Zoom and more people turned out on social media, which was really surprising. Because it's not, you know, like a private space. So a lot of people love the use of social media. And I think it's a really easier fix and easier outlet to access. And also the use of like closed captioning and ASL interpreters is, I think, really important in these spaces, not assuming that, you know, we don't have to ask people for their accessibility needs. We just need to provide it without assumption, just, you know, like any other space would be.
Thanks, Amanda. Maria?
I didn't see other hands raised, so I raised my hand. But if anybody else wants to go ahead. No? I was thinking through, oh, Robin, go for it.
Well, I was kind of hoping that you would start and then I would raise my hand. Just a couple things, just high-level thoughts. One, I think more opportunities for unstructured time. You know, these meetings are just very structured and you don't have the opportunity to kind of just randomly connect with folks like we would sometimes before or after the meeting. So if there's some unstructured time that can be built in. Another thought is instead of having the community come to us, let's see if there's opportunities where we can go to the committee. So, you know, us as an individual might go to a committee, a group meeting that, you know, they happen to be talking about something related to PCEF. Let's you know, go there individually, 1 or 2 of us or whatever, and just go to them and facilitate the conversation that way. And, you know, looking forward in the future, I'd love to be back in person with folks, and maybe participate in brainstorming sessions with folks, because, you know, in a few weeks, we're going to have an opportunity to review a whole bunch of applications and get a lot of ideas. And I think it would be extremely powerful. We can kind of percolate those ideas to other groups without sharing any confidential information. But, you know, just we would be in a position to help disseminate information and ideas and, you know, get that dialogue going. And again, not going so far as helping plan the grant writing, because I know that could be a conflict of interest, but just getting some ideas out, because I think earlier there was a comment that says people are looking for ideas and connecting with other people. So I think if we can be in a position to help with that, I think that would be helpful. So yeah, that's my kind of some thoughts. Thank you.
If you have time for one more, Jude, Michael has his hand up.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Michael?
Okay. I don't participate in a lot of Zoom meetings just because that's my life doesn't involve a lot of Zoom meetings. But the few I've been in, the chat box is usually open to everybody and it's just moderated by someone. And it seems like a good place where people can ask questions as the process is going on. where they can get questions answered by somebody who's moderating without interrupting the flow of a meeting. And I know our chat box is closed except for PCEF committee and staff, but it might be an idea, I don't know, to open up the chat box and just have somebody moderating it.
Thanks, everyone. And I think I just want to reflect back a little bit what I heard. And so when I go back to thinking about the prompt of what does it look like when community leads PCEF, a lot of what I heard from you all is, you know, basically at a minimum when they're present and they feel like they're invited to be in the space. And so when they're participating in the space, then they can help lead it. And so we need to make the invitation by having a space where we're not assuming that folks need to talk to us in advance to be able to access our meetings. So having ASL interpretation, reaching more people via social media, meeting them where they're at. And so meeting folks where they're at in social media, but also to Robin's point, going to the community and going to community events potentially, and helping to get a dialogue going for community ideas, because those community ideas are part of what can then lead PCEF. And then part of what you're talking about, Michael, as well as, right, if community leading PCEF when they're also present in the meeting and engaging in the meetings. And so the chat box is one way for parallel conversations to kind of go on with the committee and then with folks in the chat so they can connect with others. So if we can leave it open, that is another way that we can do something pretty in pretty short time to allow folks to get that interaction. Okay, so for the next piece here, we have about 8 minutes left because I think it's really important to make sure that you all have time to do committee member comments. So Katie, can you go to the next slide? So I sent you all a link to a Jamboard. Basically, it is a virtual sticky board note thing that you put sticky notes on. And you know that if we were in person, we'd be doing this and sticking sticky notes everywhere. And so I wanted to give you all 3 minutes to add stuff up there. So I'm going to give you some directions. And I'm going to have you give you all 3 minutes to do this. So if you can pull it up. And if you can't pull up the Jamboard, no worries. You can just chat James and he will just put them up for you. So the directions are, so now that you've been thinking about what it looks like when community leads PCEF, if you can create a sticky note on the left side, which you can see on the left side. So actually, can we cut to James' screen? James, can you share out the Jamboard so that we could see it live?
Yes,
I can.
Let me pull that up.
Okay. So basically,
I have it up. If you want to, I can share it real quick.
Oh, I already shared.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Great.
We have a assortment of anonymous animals here. So you like to spend some time creating a sticky note and add an engagement idea or practice that the committee should consider adopting. I have sort of this continuum of low effort, medium effort, and high effort. Things that are going to be you're going to put on low effort are things that we could probably institute, in pretty short time here. Won't need any additional resources. The stuff in medium effort, might take a few meetings to get it going, but you're going to have, just only a little bit more additional resources to sustain that. It might take a few months or maybe a year to implement. And there's the higher effort stuff where it's going to take maybe a couple of years and some resources to do, but let's consider it. So I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to put up some ideas. Let's do one idea per sticky, and then just populate the board. And after that, I think we'll have time for maybe 3 or 4 shares. And if you want to, also use your committee member comment as a time to also share a little bit about this, that could be a twofer. And one last thing I want to say before I start the timer is that this isn't the end of the conversation. I'm going to take basically the stuff on the low effort, see what we can implement in short order in some ways, and then let's I'm going to bring this information back to you all, and we can talk more about what makes sense in the future. So, do my handy dandy clock thing, and timer starts now. Ooh, all right, we're at time. And yeah, can I say, this is awesome. I'm glad you all sort of just jumped right in, and there's a lot of stickies over there. So we have a couple minutes left. So what I'm wondering if we could do is maybe, Katie, if we could just maybe jump into committee member comments, and if folks want to share something that resonated with them, they can, or they don't have to, or you can, but the invitation is open for you to do so. And you can continue to add sticky notes to this. We can only really add sticky notes as a public meeting, because this is you all collaborating. So feel free to keep getting your ideas on there, and I'll be back to talk with you all about the ideas you have here.
So do any does anyone, any committee members interested in, seems like everybody's still kind of interested in reading other people's ideas and putting up new ideas, but we are approaching 8 o'clock when we usually close the meetings. And so I would like to ask if anyone has any comments, either on the exercise that we just went through or just closing comments in general. Just a reminder that our next meeting is going to be primarily a training, getting everybody ready to sit on the scoring panels for the applications.
And Katie and June, I just want to check. We'll send this out to the committee afterwards. We can send this out, right? Just so that folks know that this isn't their only opportunity to see this.
Yeah, and if you think of something afterwards, please do email those ideas or text those ideas to us. Well, if there's no closing comments from committee members, I just will say thanks, June. This was really fun to watch. It was fun to watch everybody's ideas pop up there on the screen and have something a bit more interactive and different going on. And I'll ask Sam if you have anything else you want to share before we call it.
Just that it's really good to see you all again. It's been a long time. I certainly feel rough because we haven't met as frequently as it's been a minute. So I look forward to connecting with you all in a couple of weeks now. But just want to thank you all for showing up here and certainly participating. And I just want to also acknowledge it's really great to have June back. So thank you, June.
Yeah, thanks. Let's maybe keep this board open then for 5 minutes, just because, you know, that whole, to honor public meeting, we can't really bring this up like this. So take some time with it. I know it's also 7:52. But yeah, I mean, I'm also really excited to make my first TikTok video. I'm putting on my work plan. Sam?
I'm just curious, what social media accounts do we have right now that are active?
So we use BPS social media accounts. So we have advertised like the grant solicitation through the BPS Twitter and Facebook accounts, but we don't have PCEF specific ones. But I think there might be plans in the future. Sam, do we?
I think that, you know, right now we'll be, like I acknowledge, we'll be hiring our communications manager here fairly soon. I hope to get a decision. I hope to hear back really soon. And so that'll be in their jurisdiction to kind of think through and map out that plan. And certainly we'll bring some of this feedback back to them. But I think it's exactly as June stated. I mean, it's been really helpful to have other partners and collaborators within, whether it's the PCEF Coalition or whether it's just other groups within the city that have certainly pushed out our message, particularly around the RFP. I think, you know, there's other things we've done in the past, but the RFP has been the substantive piece that others have pushed out on their networks as well, whether it's sort of the Housing Bureau, Prosper Portland, the coalition. So but in terms of the accounts that we control, it is exactly as June stated. And it's just, I'll say it's just a question of teasing out sort of what's the best from an effort perspective. Obviously, managing social media accounts it's critically important. Social media is really important. I mean, we know that I forget what statistic it was. I think I heard something like 60% of folks under 35, get their news primarily via social media. So we know that it's an important avenue. And we'll tease that out. And Michael, I'll just add, I mean, as I know you have a communications and a journalism background prior to that, please chime in and offer any additional thoughts too, and that goes for everyone else. Okay. Do we want to call it, or do we want to? Does anyone have any additional comments? Otherwise, I think we can close this out and give you all a little bit more time.
We
just
will
want to say
need to
thanks,
close.
Sam.
Oh,
Thanks for bringing up the engagement piece as part of our meeting to kick things off again after a hiatus. I think this is something we could always talk about, and I'm happy to work with June to continue to expand on some of the ideas we discussed over the phone last week.
I just wanted to note that we will need to close the Jamboard when we log off. So if we wanted to leave it open, just kind of hang out silently for 5 minutes, then we could leave the Jamboard up and people can continue to think about and put their notes up.
And that's just for public meetings law, just so you know.
I see Ranfis has his hand up.
Yeah, I guess just comment to the team in June. Like, feel empowered to reach out to us if there are opportunities, to engage with the community outside the committee. I'm sure we all would probably say no if we can't do provide support, but I think I would hope it's an expectation that where we could provide support. Whether it's just meeting with community, joining their Zoom calls, I think let us know when those opportunities arise, and I think it'd be great to sign up. And I'm personally interested to sign up any opportunities to engage with the soccer community.
I think we're going to have a pretty healthy follow-up to this, and just in a range of how we can bring some of these pieces to life. So, thank you for the suggestion, Rafis.
Amanda?
I'm curious, does the city of Portland, I know they have a community involvement committee. Can we maybe adopt some of their ideas when it comes to engaging community to this committee as well? Or would that I should just add that to the jam board?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely connect with. I think right, because that's within the our bureau.
Yep, exactly. I think each bureau, I don't know if every bureau has one, but we certainly as a bureau have a community involvement committee, and we can certainly check in with them to see how sort of how they operate or what they've set out. Looking at faces, trying to get a sense where folks are still adding on, but it looks like we're getting some. So we will save this, and I think we should be able to PDF this and send this out. So we'll certainly do that, and as just other ideas come up, please let us know so that we can start to digest this and come back to the all. Okay. Team, I set up a Zoom for our debrief. So as soon as we log out of this, we'll put that up.
Thank you all. Great to see you today.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Here's to
Thanks,
some great
everyone.
applications.
All right.
Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good seeing everyone.
Bye.
Good night.